Okay, so a cell membrane we can find in both animal and plant cells. A cell wall is what gives the plant cells its rigidity, so those we can only find in plant cells. Cytoplasm is the liquid that is inside the cell, and that we can find in both animal and plant cells. The nucleus is the center of the cell, and that's where the DNA is kept, so that we can find in both of them. Chloroplasts is where the chlorophyll pigment is kept that plants use in order to capture sunlight and turn it into energy. So these are literally only found in plant cells. So which part of a cell contains the genetic material? So that would be the nucleus. Okay, question 2. There are stars, planets, and other objects in space. Use the table to write down the names of 2 light sources in space. So a light source is something that gives off light. It isn't something that reflects light. So Mars is a planet. It does not create light of its own. Moon is also, it doesn't create light on its own. We can see the moon at night because it reflects the light coming from the sun. Polaris and Sirius are both stars. Stars are light sources. So we can write down here Polaris and Sirius. Okay, humans can see Mars from Earth. Describe why we can see Mars in the night sky. So here we can write that the light from the sun reflects off of the surface of Mars. Okay. So describe why we cannot see details on the surface of Mars. So this is very easy. It is too far away. Even with the most powerful telescopes that we have on Earth, we can't really see the detail on the surface of Mars. And that's mainly due to the fact that we have the atmosphere in between us, and then lots of space, and then Mars. So most of the really nice pictures that we have from Mars actually comes from space probes and satellites and landers and things that we send to Mars to take pictures of it. The Hubble Space Telescope can take fairly good pictures. So we can't see details because it is just too far away from us here on the Earth in order to see. So humans can see the star Polaris from Earth. It appears to move during different times of the year. Explain why Polaris appears to move. So what happens is there is a star over here, say that's Polaris, and here we've got the sun, and here we have the Earth that is moving around the sun. So there's the Earth. So if we look from this side and we look at the star, then it sort of looks as if it's somewhere over here. Let's just say this is a screen in the back. So then we can sort of see the star being in this line. But as the Earth moves around the sun and it goes to this side, then if we look at the star, it sort of looks to be over there. So this happens with all of the stars. Obviously, the star is drawn a lot closer than it should be. So stars shift by about actually very little, but it is a slight shift, and that is just due to the fact that we are moving around the sun. So if we are looking at a star, we get that tiny little shift in the star's movement, and that is actually called the parallax movement of stars. So it appears to move during different times of the year. Explain why Polaris appears to move. So the Earth moves around the sun. And looks like. Is moving. Okay. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to shout out in the chat. I will see them. And since it's only you, I will answer them. Okay, the diagram shows part of the rock cycle. So the rock cycle is what happens under the earth crusts with magma flowing around, then coming out of a volcano, and then turning into rock there. Then it will get weathered down, turn into sedimentary rock by all of the different sand particles being carried down to the ocean floor where it gets compacted. And then it can either metamorphose by using heat and pressure in order to turn it into metamorphic rock, or it can go down through a fault again, turn back into magma, and the cycle continues. So the trick here is these words. Here we have melting and cooling, heat and pressure, melting and cooling, there's heat and pressure. Now these two, weathering. Weathering means that we only get one kind of rock, and that would be sedimentary rock. So that is all of the big rocks get broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller particles until we've got very fine sand. The sand will then form in layers on the bottom of lakes, rivers, things like that, until it gets compacted down enough to form rocks that have layers. So whenever we see weathering, we know we are dealing with sedimentary rock. And that means that the other side, this heat and pressure, see here we have heat and pressure, and here we have heat and pressure. So heat and pressure changes another kind of rock into what is known as a metamorphic rock. Metamorphic literally means a rock that has changed. So an example that I can give here is through weathering, old bits of trees and algae and all sorts of things can get broken down and turned into charcoal. And then if you apply heat and pressure, say at the bottom of a volcano, or just due to the fact that it's lower down, deeper into the earth, then that charcoal can turn into diamonds. So that is how we get diamonds. Diamonds is a metamorphic rock. Quartz is also a metamorphic rock. All sorts of things that we get is metamorphic rocks. Sedimentary rocks is all of the sort of rocks that we get that has layers. So this would be sandstone, chalk, all sorts of things like that, sedimentary. Chalk, for example, chalk rock by heat and pressure actually turns into marble. So marble is again a metamorphic rock. Igneous rocks are things that come out of volcanoes. So this would be things like basalt and stuff like that. So the question here just says complete the diagram by writing in the two missing types of rocks. So we did that. Question B says, Pierre investigates rocks. He describes the rocks he investigates, and he has a table of observations. So rock A is a gray and white rock that has a low density. Rock B is a black rock that has a high density. Rock C is a shiny black rock that looks like glass. And rock D is a black rock that has a low density. So we have two rocks with low densities, this one and this one. And then we have something with a high density and something that looks like glass. So here is an identification key. So now we can figure out which rock goes where. So first, it looks like glass. So yes, we've got one rock that does look like glass. So that would be rock C over here. So this would be rock C going from there. Does not look like glass, so that would be A, B, or D. So now, if we look at the low densities, we have two of them, so that would be A or D. So A or D goes this way, and this way will be B, because it has a high density. And then A and D, B, D, we can just check which one is gray and white and which one is black. So the low density black one is D, and the gray and white one is A. So now we've sorted it out. This is B, C, this is A, this is D, and this is B. So now they want us to write down what these rocks are. So A, B, C, and D. So we've got these. A is pumice. D is scoria. B is basalt. And C is obsidian. Okay. So question 4. The diagram shows the human circulatory system. So the circulatory system is the heart, the lungs, and then the arteries and veins going through your body. So parts of the system are labeled with the letters A to G. So use the diagram to identify parts of the circulatory system from their descriptions. Write your answers in the table. So the part that pumps the blood to the lungs. Okay. So this is the part over here that will pump the blood to the lungs. So this is the path that it follows to the lungs. That is the blood that comes back and goes through the system. So if over here, that will be the part that pumps the blood to the lungs. And you can see that by looking at these little clips here. So you can see from this, it points sort of that way. So the blood will come through from here, go out that way to go to the lungs. So then it'll come back here. So you can see these point down. So here it'll go into the heart that way, out through there, and then go through the body. Okay, so how did people make up all the names for the rocks? I have no idea. Some of these rocks literally come from all sorts of things. Pumice, that is that sort of rock that you can buy that people use to scrub their feet with. It sort of looks slightly spongy, but like cement that has lots of bubbles in it. That's pumice. And they literally named that because of the use that they have from it. I have no idea where half of the names for rocks come from, but it's actually very interesting to go see what rocks are called, what they come from, how they evolve from certain rocks to other types of rocks. So yeah, the pretty much few kinds of rocks that I know is granite. Granite is a very hard rock that forms when a volcano doesn't erupt over the outside, like into the atmosphere, onto the surface of the earth. That would be basalt. Basalt is what happens when a volcano erupts over the surface of the earth. Granite is what forms when the volcano erupts, but it erupts underneath the underneath the surface of the earth. So there's still layers of rock above it and below it. So it stays hotter for a lot longer and under pressure, and then it sort of crystallizes it a lot more. And that's why granite is a lot harder than basalt, and granite has big crystals embedded inside it, and that makes it really, really good for kitchen counters. Other things like sandstone. Sandstone is a layered rock, and sandstone and limestone is where we tend to get fossils. So they're quite cool. Limestone is what forms from the bones, the shells, all sorts of things of small sea creatures and things. And as they die, they sort of layer onto each other, and then eventually it turns into limestone. And limestone tend to have the fossils of slightly bigger sea creatures embedded inside it. So that's really, really cool. Sandstone is literally lots of sand that sort of gets compacted over time. And sandstone tends to have the bones or fossils in it of more land creatures. So this is the kind of things where you may get something like dinosaur bones or the prehistoric human bones and things like that. So different kinds of stones. I have no idea what scoria is. Obsidian is a very shiny black rock that literally looks like glass, and they used it to make tools with in ancient times, because you could literally just strike it with another rock and it would chip off and make a very, very sharp edge, so you could use it as a knife or as spearheads, arrowheads, and so forth. That's obsidian. And I have no idea where half of the names comes from. These are easy: sandstone and limestone. Easy to know. The rest, I have no idea. But okay, back to the question. The part that pumps blood to the lungs, we said that was F. Okay, the parts where oxygen leaves the blood. So here we have the blood from the heart, and it has lots of oxygen because it went past the lungs to pick up the oxygen. And now it travels down through here into the capillary arteries over here, and that essentially goes to your tissues. They're tiny little arteries that literally only one red blood cell can pass through at a time. And this is where all of your tissues are, is in between and around these capillary arteries. So the part where oxygen leaves the blood, that would be part E. The part where the blood is at its greatest pressure, that is actually over here right after it exits the heart. But in terms of this, we could actually say, I said G here because it's this little atrium here, but I actually have no idea which one they want. I'll say F, because F is where the blood gets pressurized to actually go through the rest of the body. This one is a little hard to know, mainly because their sketch is slightly weird and wonky. Yeah, and the reason why the sketch is slightly weird and wonky is the bigger heart chamber, this one, is technically supposed to be going to the body and not to the lungs. Okay, an artery that takes blood to the body, so that would be D on our sketch. Okay. The diagrams show the particles in different substances. Draw a line to match each diagram with a description of that diagram. So we've got 3 diagrams over here. I'm going to zoom out a bit so that we can see everything. Okay, here we go. We've got diagrams and we've got descriptions. So we have a mixture of compounds, a mixture of elements, a mixture of elements and compounds, a single compound, and a single element. Okay, so we only have these 3 pictures over here. A compound is 2 atoms that are stuck together. So here we don't have any compounds. Here we do have compounds, but it's only one kind. So this will be a single compound. Here we've got some elements, that is the single ones. So that's an element, that's an element, that's an element, those are all elements. And these 3 over here are compounds. So that would be a mixture of elements and compounds. And this one would just be a mixture of elements. Okay. So question 6 says, Sophia and Jamila investigate photosynthesis. They use water plants, and this is the apparatus that they use. So they have a water plant, and then they stick a funnel over it sort of upside down, and then a test tube over the funnel so that they can catch the gas bubbles. And then they will measure how much gas bubbles they collect. And then they have a lamp, and they can move it further or closer to the lamp to see how much light it gets and what the difference is. So in their experiment, they measure the number of gas bubbles made in 1 minute. So what is the name of the gas made in photosynthesis? That would be oxygen. Okay, what equipment does Sophia use to measure 1 minute? That would be a stopwatch. They don't say it anywhere, but that is the technical equipment of what you would use for measuring a minute. Sophia and Jamila do 2 more experiments. They move the lamp further away from the plant each time. Here are their results. So here it's fairly close to the water plant, and here we can see we've got lots of gas bubbles. Here it's a little further away, and we've got about half as much gas bubbles. Here it's double the length of that one. We've got about half as much again. So why do they use 1 minute for each experiment? And this would be so that the experiments are fair. If I can spell. Okay. Complete the sentence describing the pattern of results. As the distance between the light and the water plant increases, the number of gas bubbles produced decreases. Okay. Predict the results for a distance of 30 centimeters and a distance of 50 centimeters. So 50 centimeters is somewhere in between here, and 50 centimeters is somewhere after here. So they will mark it correct as long as it's between these 2 numbers. So just pick somewhere in the middle. I'll say about 35, 40. Yeah, let's go with 40. Okay. So that will be about 40 gas bubbles and a distance of 50 centimeters. So that's even further than 40. So as long as it's slightly less than this, so let's go with about 15. And as long as it's, they can see that you know more or less where it would go, then they will mark it correct. Circle the correct word or phrase that completes the conclusion. The rate of photosynthesis either increases, does not change, or decreases as light decreases. So the rate of photosynthesis decreases as the light decreases. The more light you have, the more the plants can use the light in order to photosynthesize. Okay. So that is the end of question 6. I'm going to do question 7 and then we'll be done for today. So Lily balances a ruler on a pivot, and we need to calculate the size of this force over here. So this has to do with mechanical advantage. So mechanical advantage has 2 formulas, and the first one is the input length over the output length. And the other formula is the input force over the output force. Okay. So we need to see which ones of these we have. We have both lengths. So we have that one and we have that one, so we can calculate this. Okay. So we're going to use this formula first to calculate our mechanical advantage. And then with our second formula, we have our input force, that is our 2 newtons over there. We don't have our output force, but we can calculate our mechanical advantage from this. So let's go do that. Our input length is 12 centimeters. And our output length is 6 centimeters. So our mechanical advantage here will be 2. So now we know what our mechanical advantage is. So now we can look at this formula. So we know our mechanical advantage is 2. Our input force is 2 newtons. And our output force, we still need to calculate. So we can put an x over here so that we can work out for x. Okay, so now what do? We need to find x. So we can multiply across. So we can do that because this will be 2 over 1, technically. There's lots of different ways of working this out. So we have 1 times 2 newtons, so we get 2 newtons, and 2 times x, so we have 2x. So we divide by 2 on both sides, so we have 1 newton is x. So our output force will then be 1 newton.